All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig in a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video. Steve Young is worried about Brock Purdy's rust. We'll talk about that coming up next. And of course, we're brought to you by Pig in a Pickle. Check them out, Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open in both spots from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig in a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Get the brisket chili. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Tell them that Larry Krueger sent you. And this video is also brought to you by Mojo Fantasy. Check that link in the description. Use the promo code Krug, K-R-U-E-G, and they'll match you up to your first $100. All right, let's hear from Steve Young. Steve Young went on KMBR. He went on with Tolbert and Copeland on his regular weekday spot on the Sports Leader and talked a little bit about Brock Purdy. Now, Kyle Shanahan told us on Wednesday that Brock Purdy's not going to play in Week 18 against the Rams. He's for sure going to sit out. And then the Niners have the bye week. So he's not going to play in Week 18. He's not going to play in the wild card round. So there's going to be, roughly 3 weeks between when he played against Washington and when he plays again in the divisional round of the playoffs. So we're talking about roughly 21 days, and Steve has concerns over, the rust factor and how rusty is Brock Purdy. So let's hear him in his own words describe his concerns, and then we'll comment on it next.
Well, from a I can speak from the quarterback spot. I don't like sitting out. It's not taking a week off. It's just I'd rather warm up, play a quarter, even a half, and be done. Like, that's the way to kind of stay with it. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like there's any, now you're going to get the next week off, so you're not going to play for 3 weeks. 21 days. That's just, from a quarterback spot, that's a hard restart. It takes a minute. I always said it takes every game you miss, it takes a half to kind of get fully back up to speed. And so, for me, I would want to go and, kind of dress up, ready to go through the routine, be under fire, don't want to embarrass yourself, go out there, all that pressure that you get used to. You think football, the biggest mistake that people can make in football, and that's why you learn as a little kid, is to go out there and just, throw your jock on the floor. Like, you get yourself punched in the face. Like, you have to be ready to play emotionally to play football. And so as you get to the pro game, no one's just just chilling. So yeah. I think, you got to go through the routine. You got to get ready, and you got to go play good football. And I think that you should look forward to it. I think that, you stay the core, you stay in the moment. This is a series of games that are set up for this to get to the spot. And in some ways, the time off is great, and the time off is not great. And I think anyone who thinks it's all great, it's not all great. It's great, but it's not all great. And so you got to watch out for the parts that I just described, because you do not want to get into a divisional game against a team that has potential to throw some darts around, the Eagles or the Cowboys, and then start slow. And then we got beat in '87 by the we talked about last time, by the Anthony Carter Vikings. They just came out and just big plays, big game, and before you know it, it's over. You're like, well, wait a second. No, we're the number 1 seed, bro. What are you doing? You're supposed to just lay down. And it just doesn't happen. So there is fear. There should be a little fear in taking a couple weeks off.
All right, there's Steve Young right there with Tom Tolbert and Adam Copeland commenting about how he's worried about the rust factor that Brock Purdy has. Okay, here's a couple thoughts on it. One, you could quickly jump to, what does Steve know? But of course, Steve is a Hall of Fame quarterback, and he knows quite a bit. And obviously, that's just a joke. But I think that I'm not as worried as Steve is in this particular situation about the rust factor, simply because Brock Purdy is really a young player, and he's not played in the NFL for years and years and years. He's played only 2 years in the NFL. He had major offseason elbow surgery. If you go back and look at what he did at Iowa State, he played roughly 10 to 12 games a year. He never played more than 13 games in a season. He's already played 18 games this season. He's already played 16 regular season games and 2 preseason games. So he's already played 18 games this year. Rookies a lot of time hit a wall. And I'm not saying he's rookie because he's not a rookie. He's a second-year player. But we're talking about the need to rest versus the downside of being rusty. And when you look at his college stats from Iowa State, he never had more than 475 pass attempts in a single season. If you just look at what he's played already this year, the 18 games, he's at roughly 460 pass attempts already. And you're still going to ask him to play a divisional round game, an NFC championship game, and a Super Bowl. So he's got 3 more games to go. So he's going to wind up with probably close to 100 more pass attempts than he ever had in college, and definitely over 100 more pass attempts than he averaged in college by the end of this year. So the workload is pretty great. I'll also defer to Kyle Shanahan on he knows his player best, and if he feels that Brock needs some rest, then Brock probably needs some rest. And then at the end of the day, I think you got to ask yourself the main question, which is, what can you live with? Can you live with he plays in week 18 against the Rams and he gets hurt and he's either out of the playoffs or not 100%? Or can you live with, you know what, in the first quarter of the divisional round playoff game, man, he felt a little rusty and he was a little bit out of rhythm, and it took him a couple series to find his rhythm. And that's where I think I would side with Shanahan and the Niners and what they've decided so far, which is to not play Brock in week 18. The other thing about week 18 is you're playing a Rams team that you very well could be playing again in just a couple weeks after. And why give them they haven't played Purdy since early in the season. Why give them another look at Brock Purdy and another way to scout him? Why do that? Why give him that? When you may have to beat them for real to win the Super Bowl or to go on and win in the NFC playoffs and advance to the Super Bowl. So I hear what Steve's saying, and I got nothing but respect for Steve, and Steve knows. And the Niners in that week before the Super Bowl in January of '95 supposedly had a practice week where the ball never hit the turf, that they were just so locked in. And Steve, I think, really needed those practice reps to lock in. And so he's drawing from his own experience here and saying, hey, you know what? There's a rust factor that's very real. And an endless amount of rest is not a good thing for Brock Purdy. And I understand where he's coming from. But when you factor in, you may have to play the Rams again. Brock Purdy may right now be playing with some minor dings that nobody's talking about. There's a saying in pro football, but when you get to week 15, everybody's hurt. Tell me when you're injured. So he's got something, whether it's a elbow soreness, whether it's fatigue, whether it's bruises, whether it's, ribs, or, he got banged his head around a couple times earlier this year. I think the rest is actually going to do him good. If you look at the way his arm responded coming out of the bye week in that Jacksonville game, I thought his arm looked remarkably fresh, and he made some incredible throws in that game. He didn't look rusty, and he looked like he gained arm strength. So I'm going to defer to Shanahan on this one. If Shanahan believes that Brock Purdy needs to, sit out week 18, and that's in his best interest, and that's what Shanahan, after consulting with Brock himself and the coaches, decided, you know what? I think that's the best call. Don't give the Rams another look. Give this kid a chance to rest his body. I love the way he looked in that Jacksonville game coming out of the bye, arm strength-wise. I felt like he gained some arm strength. And then look at the workload. 10 to 12 games is what he played in college. He's already played 18. He's going to play 21 if they go to the Super Bowl. Look at the pass attempts. The most he ever had was 475. He's at 460 right now. He's probably going to be, 100 past his average in college. He's only a second-year player. So I love Steve Young, and I respect the hell out of him, and I would take note of what he said and understand that it's not a no-risk situation to sit him out. There is some risk, right? The risk is that he's rusty. But I would rather take that risk than take the risk of he gets hurt and he's not playing in the playoffs. Because if you put Sam Darnold in there, I don't think the 49ers are going to the Super Bowl. And or that even Brock could just get dinged up and maybe he loses a little bit of his mobility. I think he's going to need his full skill set, including being fresh and being mobile, to beat the teams that are on that schedule in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl. So I love Steve, but I'll side with Shanahan and the Niners on this one. I would choose rest over rust. I would prioritize rest over the potential for rust. But I think Steve always is interesting because he makes you think. All right, thanks to Pig in a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Mojo Fancy for sponsoring this video. Thanks to all you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.